In today's video, I will explain why I personally believe that by September, each of you should have roughly 2,500 more XRP. I want to be extremely clear about this. I do feel that there will be a slight correction following our most recent rally, but that is insignificant in comparison to what I anticipate is going to occur. And I will explain why. How before this huge rally that just occurred, I had a lot of fantastic entries, which is why I'm preparing for a lot more entries soon after a few important requirements are satisfied. I want to start with some of the most significant news we have received in a very long time. So you guys really need to pay attention because things are about to become quite insane. Because of what we're witnessing here with Canada, Australia, the United States of America, Europe, China, Japan, and South Korea, I have a very strong indicator that this bull run will really be prolonged a little bit farther than we had previously thought. Thus, the latest employment figures for the United States and Canada showed unfavorable outcomes. You may be asking yourself, is this bearish? But it's not, because it's just another sign that the Federal Reserve has to lower interest rates, not only in the US, but also in Canada, Europe, and the UK. Additionally, given the information we're seeing here, we'll need to lower rates. And based on this information, which we'll discuss in a moment, I actually conducted an analysis of the possibility that the Federal Reserve will lower interest rates. This is official data. In July, Canada experienced the biggest monthly job loss since the epidemic, with almost 40,000 jobs destroyed. It is absurd to have 40,000 employment in a nation with a population of little over 30 million. The level of employment participation that is exiting the market is ridiculous. Although there are other explanations for this, things were not looking much better in the US. Additionally, a significant number of jobs were lost there. Why is this happening? To put it simply, the economy is under a lot of strain at the moment. Because of the new business dynamics we are witnessing globally, companies are unable to afford to hire as many people as they once did. Because of the lack of market liquidity and the record high levels of debt, consumer demand is not nearly as high as it once was. Rate reduction is the sole solution to all of these issues. For these businesses to continue growing at a moderate rate, we need more money moving through the markets. In order to thoroughly explain this to you all, I entered some data into Grok here. I needed some historical instances of this kind of material because I was so interested. And I asked, how likely is it that a nation will lower interest rates in order to boost the economy when jobless data are consistently poor? Although I am aware that poor job data is among the first factors the Fed takes into account when lowering interest rates, I wanted to see some probability based on past performance. Poor job data, including growing unemployment or sluggish job creation, are a constant indicator of a faltering economy. This is frequently seen as a necessity to boost growth in order to avert a recession by central banks, such as the US Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, or the Bank of Japan. One of the first things they look at is this. For instance, a July 2024 jobs report in the US revealed that just 114,000 new jobs had been generated, while the unemployment rate had increased to 4.3%, the highest level since late 2021. Discussions regarding whether or not the Fed should have postponed rate cuts for too long were sparked by this. The Fed's twin mandate of price stability and maximum employment may be prioritized by central banks if job statistics continue to rise. This would increase the chance of rate decreases at this time. However, the Fed must also consider inflation data. Are the figures for inflation excessive or low? Do they moderate? Are they the intended target? Thus, we are currently witnessing this in the United States of America. The inflation rate is precisely where it should be, either somewhat higher or lower than it should be. That's ideal for the Fed, all right? The unemployment rate is now more than 4%. They don't feel comfortable at that level, and it's actually rising a little bit above it. The same is true for Canada. The same is true for Japan, Europe, and the UK. China and South Korea are similar. These figures are increasing not only in the US economy, but also in the worldwide economy. Not limited to Canada, because the US dollar is the world's reserve currency and the pressure on the Fed to hold off on cutting rates is mounting. The global economy needs this boost right now. As you may observe, there are also, in response to cooling inflation and deteriorating labor markets, the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates by 0.5% in September and 0.25% in November, lowering the fund rate to 4.5%. These cuts were influenced by both national and international causes. The Fed may decide to further lower rates in 2025 if dismal jobs data is released, such as an employment rate that remains at 4.2% or above. For this reason, I believe it will occur in September. Thus, Grok's thorough examination ultimately gave the opportunity. Alternatively, there is a 70 to 90% chance that the United States and Canada will lower their rates. When this is combined with inflation figures that are under control, consumer spending has decreased. In other words, we're not witnessing anything that was there during periods of high inflation. Everything appears to be going well. At this time, the Federal Reserve cannot afford to lower interest rates. They can do it. And because their own publicly stated objective is falling short, when it comes to unemployment statistics, they really have no more reasons not to. Therefore, that is very important because if the Fed lowers rates at its next meeting in September, and then again the following month and again after that, it will cost trillions of dollars when you also take into account other nations like the UK and possibly even South Korea, Canada, and others. Now, I believe it will definitely happen in October if it doesn't happen in September, which would surprise me greatly. We appreciate you everybody watching the video today.